Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Bullets and Bourbon. I'm Matt Gunlock, and tonight I'm joined by Clay Novak. Clay is an author, retired Army officer, and leader. So, Clay, before we kind of get started with all the questions, can you just go ahead and give yourself a quick introduction?
Yeah, a quick one. First of all, Matt, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation. So short introduction is I'm Clay Novak. I am a retired Army officer. I spent a total of 27 years in uniform, 24 plus on active duty. I was an infantryman my entire career. And I'm a Chicago kid, born and raised, blue collar family. Went to college, joined the National Guard to help pay my way through college, and fell in love with the Army. Hated being a private, and then I went back to school after basic training infantry school. Joined ROTC full time and went on active duty in '95 and stayed on active duty until 2019 when I retired.
So, I got to ask a quick question since you are a Chicago kid. Are you a Blackhawks fan?
I am a Blackhawks fan.
All right. Who's your favorite player from
So
all
I
time?
grew up I grew up here and didn't get to see him play live as a kid. But Stan Mikita is an amazing icon in the city of Chicago. I actually went to high school with his son. So I've seen tons and tons and tons of footage of Stan, when I was growing up, but probably from my lifetime, always loved watching Chelios bang folks around playing defense. So yeah.
Yes, I love Chelios. I am not a Blackhawks fan by any means. Like my favorite team growing up was the Dallas Stars, and that was like from
Okay.
like I knew them like when they were the Minnesota North
Minnesota North
Stars,
Stars.
and
Very
then they
nice.
then they transferred down. Mike Matano is still my all-time favorite hockey player, but
Sure.
I always loved Eddie Belfour. Like whenever he was on the Blackhawks, and then whenever he transferred
Yeah.
down to Dallas, like just an upstanding, solid dude who could just he could just grind, like just
Yeah.
solid goalie.
Yeah. Yeah. Eddie the Eagle, man. He was awesome. We loved him.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I was kind of upset seeing Chelios, leave the Blackhawks to go to the infamous Detroit Red Wings.
That was like as much as I love Chelios, that is like the one of the high end acts of treason, I think, in the city of Chicago. I think the only thing worse than that probably would be to leave the Bears and play for the Packers. That's
Yes,
probably about as bad as it gets.
I mean that's like Ray Bork, for instance, back in what was it, 2001, 2002, whenever the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah,
Ray Bork, I mean, and I get it. I'm not a Boston guy, but I get it. You play your entire career trying to win a Stanley Cup, and the Bruins just could never get it done. So
yeah,
he went to the Avalanche and he got it done with the Avalanche. Like that's the best ending to a career you could have, even if
sure.
it wasn't on the team that you played for. But I mean, he's just a solid guy too.
Oh yeah, I mean that guy was a beast for years. I
Hmm.
mean, all those guys, whatever it was about the number 77, whether it was him or Coffee or what I mean,
Yeah.
those guys were pretty brutal back then.
Yeah. I miss that old time hockey. I still keep up with hockey today. Like, the Capitals are my team now. Like back in 2010, I was on ship and me and a couple buddies were just watching the Olympics, and it was like it was Czech Republic versus Russia. And you had Jaromir Jagr there on the ice with Czech, and then you had, Alex Ovechkin on Russia, and Ovechkin just grinded and like just pummeled freaking a Yager, and Yager got up like hell yeah, this is what I missed. Yager came back to the NHL the following
Yeah.
year, and Ovechkin's just a powerhouse. Like as of this recording, he is I think 25 goals away from beating Gretzky's record, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw Yager at I think he's 55 now. He's still playing like second tier hockey somewhere. I
Yeah.
just it's amazing. Those guys are just, there's a couple of those old horses, that just they keep playing, which is pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
yeah, that old hockey is the cool difference always between American hockey and international hockey was the rink size. I mean,
yep.
you couldn't help but be physical on an American-sized rink, and then you'd watch in the Olympics, and it was bigger and more open, and it was faster, and it was more finesse. But yeah, that old school American hockey. I mean, I'm old enough, I'm probably older than you, but I remember, McTavish, skating around with no helmet on.
Hmm.
I do remember the end of that. So, yeah, that those old days of hockey they're gone, but not forgotten for sure.
I frequently tell people like one of the teams I miss that's no longer around is the Hartford Whalers. Like just I love that team. I don't know why, what it was, but they were a very brutal team. And like talk about old school hockey players, somebody playing to like mid 50s, he played till 55, Gordie Howe.
Gordie
And he
Howe, yeah,
and he played with both his sons on the team
yep,
as well.
yep,
Like
sure did.
you don't get that anymore.
Nope,
I mean, you get the lineages like, father retires, son is now
sure,
getting drafted and everything, and
yeah,
that's cool, but like being able to play with your sons on the ice,
yeah,
never gonna happen again today.
yeah, no way.
But this isn't a hockey podcast, but it could be because like
It could be.
I constantly like people are like you don't talk about bourbon. Well, bourbon is a silent partner, and what do you do whenever you drink bourbon? You have conversations.
Sure. Yeah, it's a greases the wheels of
Yes,
conversation is what it does. Yeah.
absolutely. So, um, as we discussed, you served in the army. Total time about 27 years. You were an infantryman. You held every billet from platoon commander to a cavalry squadron leader or commander. What billet and what deployment were the most memorable for you? And they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, I was a captain, company commander. I spent 10 years of my career in the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg. It's that was the bulk of my career in one place. It was my Army home, and I was a captain, a company commander on 9/11. So we were, and it still is, for the Army, the ready force for the Army and the ready force for the nation. So we were all on, on varying cycles of an 18-hour blowout. We all rotated through. But being a company commander, 150 paratroopers in that window, and then I took that rifle company to Afghanistan in 2002. So it was the second rotation of Americans into Afghanistan. I mean, I was home from my first combat deployment before Iraq ever started.
Damn.
We went into Afghanistan in '02 in June, and we were home in December because we were only doing 6 monthers back then. And Iraq didn't kick off until the following March. Like
March 19th,
yeah,
2003.
yeah. I was home. I watched it on television,
Mm-hmm.
But that group of guys, that rifle company, Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, was at 100% my favorite assignment. And then to be able to take that group of warriors to combat after commanding, I commanded them for 17 months before we went to Afghanistan. So I ran the whole
Oh
run up for
wow.
a year and a half, and then took them to combat for 6 months. We were a well-oiled machine. Like I truthfully at that point, I didn't have a lot of work to do. Like those guys, that team was set, and we were stacked with talent. I had so many great junior leaders, from my young officers to my NCOs. It was awesome. Really, really a great organization.
So did you guys have to like do a lot of stabilization and like get guys to like, hey, we're gonna stabilize. Like, do you want to stay in? And I know stop loss was a thing back then too. Like whenever I
So
first
stop loss wasn't like that wasn't even a point of discussion back then. We had guys who had to make decisions. So, 9/11 happened obviously fall, September
Yep.
of 2001. We didn't go until June of 2002, but we knew like we got our plane tickets, our tip, we hit the tib fin to deploy around April. So we kind of knew we were going. We were told we were going, but we didn't know for sure until probably April. And then we did have guys who had to make a decision like, am I going to stay in? Am I going to reenlist or am I not? And we had guys that went both directions. We had
Yeah.
guys that decided to stay in. We had guys that decided to get out. The funny one was I had three kids. So my rifle company, the goal in the 82nd was to have 20 enlisted Rangers in every rifle company. So graduates of the Army Ranger School, 20 enlisted guys. And so my company was right. We had a really high number. We were right on the cusp. We had 18, I think, at the time. And I had three kids who were set and ready to go. They'd done all the pre-training and they were ready to go to Ranger School. And we got told, hey, you're going to Afghanistan. You guys are going to combat. And all three of them, it was like out of Band of Brothers. They all walked in my office together and they said, hey, sir, we don't want to go to Ranger School. We want to go to Afghanistan. And I looked at all three of them and I said, listen, this war is not ending anytime soon. You're going to have plenty of opportunities to go to combat. You're ready to go to Ranger School now. Go. Go, graduate, come back here to Fort Bragg, take a little bit of leave. And if you still want to come forward, we'll put you on a plane and we'll bring you to Afghanistan. And all three of them went to school, all three of them graduated, and all three of them came forward and met us in theater. So that just tells you that kind of the quality of kids that I had in that company back then was just amazing.
You don't you don't get that often. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
you, guys that are that dedicated, like, I'd like to say you get that all the time, but you just don't. And it's pretty outstanding. And whenever you can see, guys who are just that dedicated.
yeah, it was pretty awesome. We had I had guys that would chase that. They chase opportunities to go to Ranger School. They would chase, and us being in an airborne unit, guys would chase opportunities to go to Jump Master School or whatever they could to improve themselves. We didn't have to do a lot of the forced motivation stuff. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It was guys would go. I never had to. We never had to ask for volunteers. We always just had them stacked up and waiting. So when those opportunities presented themselves, we were actually more along the lines of like, well, who do we pick? We've only got three slots. We've got seven guys who want to go. We always had to run a order of merit list for just about every one of those opportunities for development. So yeah, it was really, really a great group of guys.
I love everything about the Marine Corps. I absolutely enjoyed my time, and I quite often tell people, the Marine Corps, the military in general, it is a love-hate relationship. There's going to be days that you absolutely love it and
For
days that you,
sure.
you hate it. Um,
Yep.
but the one thing I wish the Marine Corps did have more opportunities would be to go to some of those Army schools. Like, I know that they're not all part of the mission, but those are incentives or those are opportunities to where you can cross pollinate and learn from other organizations.
Sure. Yep. We had when I went to Ranger School way back in 1996, and we had every service in attendance in small numbers. There were three Marines in my class. They were all Force Recon guys.
Yep.
We had three Navy SEALs. None of them graduated. And we had an Air Force PJ that was in the class. So we had a little bit of everything in there, plus international guys. We had guys from other countries that were there. But you're right. Ranger School is a leadership school as much as
Hmm.
it is anything else. It's
Yep.
not learning Army specific stuff. It's a gut check for yourself to push yourself as hard as you can.
Do you have the
Learn what you're.
grit?
Oh yeah, for sure. And you do learn, how the Army kind of does things. And those are, back before we even knew what TTPs were, you could take that back. A Marine, infantryman could take those things back from Ranger School and take them back to his unit and, teach little bits and pieces of how the Army does things. So sure, those opportunities to cross-pollinate, those are always good opportunities. And you're right. I don't think we take advantage of those. Even the Army doesn't. We don't take
Hmm.
advantage of those things enough.
No, one of my best experiences in the Marine Corps was back in 2017. I was in with Task Force 51-5 stationed out in Bahrain. And I had an opportunity to go get forward deployed with just showed up AP with 19 Special Forces Group. Came back from that, and then my Master Guns. He came up to me, he was like, "Hey man," like within a week or two of coming back, he's like, "Hey, I need you to leave in 2 weeks to go to Djibouti, Africa." I'm just like, "Fuck, man, are you serious?" I was
Yeah.
like, I was like, I was like, "How long do I have to be over there?" Well, you're gonna be there till February. I was like, "I rotate out of here in January." He's like, "It's all right. I'm getting your orders extended." I'm
Ugh.
like, "All right. I see how this is going." I was like, I was like, "That's a master sergeant's billet. I'm a newly promoted gunny." He's like, "Me and Sergeant Major have been down the entire list of master sergeants and gunnies, and we want you to go because like you can carry out the general's guidance. Like he
Sure.
trusts you the most. We trust you the most to do this. Like you're a legit dude. You can get the mission done." I'm just like, all right. And it was just being a liaison officer. I own nothing, but I had to ask for the world and get what I could take. Um,
Yeah.
and honestly, as much as I hate Djibouti, Africa, that was probably one of the most fulfilling billets that I ever served in because I worked at a CJTF HOA Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa. I
Yeah.
worked in the J3 under Colonel Castlebury, who was an Army colonel, and just real solid guy. Like him and I, we whenever I first met him, we just started having a conversation. He was like, "Hey, what's your background? What do you do?" All that kind of stuff, and it just turned into conversational stuff.
Sure.
Me, young gunny, and we found that we both had a love for mortars. He was a Mortar 81's platoon commander whenever he was with Rangers and everything, and just solid guy. And then just being able to coordinate missions, coordinate actions, and then jump over to some other areas and work with them. It was an invaluable experience that just opened my eyes to the joint world, which honestly, the Marine Corps, unless you're on a staff billet or something, you don't get those opportunities. So
Yeah.
that was a huge turning point in my career, just working with the different branches. And, you talk about the PJs. Not many people really know about the PJs,
Yeah.
but those guys are freaking solid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, between those guys and the combat controllers,
Hmm.
on the Air Force side, I mean, we all, I mean, we all talk crap about each other. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's inevitable, but and I know that there are folks within those communities that, are just those jobs within the Air Force or within the Marine Corps, within the Navy, that no matter what, we know we're getting quality people when they cross attach. We would get combat controllers all the time. I worked with those guys all the way back in 2002. I'll never forget Jimbo, the combat controller, the JTAC that
Hmm.
was, with my battalion and often attached to my company. So yeah, I mean those folks are great, but if you don't get those opportunities, I had a somewhat similar situation. I did a year in Baghdad, again assigned to the 82nd, and I was S3 for the first 6 months, battalion S3 in an infantry battalion, and then the second 6 months I was a battalion XO. And then so I came home after a year in Baghdad. That was 2008 into nine, and I was home for a few months, and then I got told I was selected to be the aide de camp for then Lieutenant General Rodriguez in Kabul.
Mm.
So it was one of those like, hey, you got to go interview for this job, and I'm like, I just got home, like I just did a year, and they're like, yeah, that's nice. I'm like, okay, well, how long is the list? And they're like, well, you are the list. And I'm like,
Oh
okay.
man.
Yeah, right. So to be an aide for a 3-star in a NATO headquarters, joint and NATO headquarters, in Kabul, and get that peek behind the curtain, you can't turn that down. Like
Yeah.
that, it's not a thing. So, I was home. I did 12 months in Baghdad. I was home for 7 months, and then I did 13 months in Kabul. Right,
Oh.
quick turn, 2 long ones, and that one in Kabul, like you said, I learned more in that job from working with NATO, working with joint service across the board, and just getting that peek into that 3-star level headquarters. But I was working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for
Hmm.
13 months. Like it was friggin', I was exhausted by the time I came home, but learned more in those 13 months than I probably did in 13 years in the Army. It was just, it was a rough deployment just because it was exhausting, but the learning curve literally for 13 months was, standing on end. So, and you can't turn down those opportunities. You're an idiot if you do.
Yeah. And the
And it's
friendships you
challenging.
build out there, like
Oh,
you
it's
build all
crazy. Yeah.
you build a lot of friendships with like your platoons, your company, and those are invaluable, relationships and experiences that you'll never get rid of. But like when you're in the grind, whether it's a staff billet, in a joint headquarters somewhere, um, you really get to know people at another level and know who's worth their salt and who you want to hang your hat around.
Yep. And then, and you get to see things that you don't normally see. I mean, he was a 3-star and I went everywhere the 3-star went. And I got into all the same, the same rooms and the same meetings. And, I saw a lot of stuff that people don't get to see. I mean,
Hmm.
I was over there when the Bin Laden raid happened.
Oh wow.
Um, and so, you know, we didn't know, and I say this in all honesty, my boss was running the ground war in Afghanistan, but that was a, I mean, everybody knows now that was a CIA soft operation in Pakistan. We had no idea. We didn't know until then, like I came in the next morning, I'd get there before the boss, and because of the time zone differences, like I had emails waiting for me and messages from people like, "Hey, congratulations, you guys can come home now." I'm like, what the fuck are these people talking about? So it's like I jumped on the news and my boss comes walking in. It's like, hey sir, I think we killed bin Laden last night. And he was like, what? He had no clue. So, but I mean, I got to see, on the JWEX terminal, I mean, I got to see all the classified traffic after that operation went down. So you get a lot of exposure to a lot of things that you there's no replacing that. There's no other opportunity you're ever going to get like that. So yeah, it was a rough deployment physically, and mentally for me, but wouldn't trade that one at
Hmm.
all, ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like kind of like you, and I did it to myself. So in 2016, I was deployed on the B surf rotation out to Romania and got to jump from Romania, Bulgaria, Israel, stuff like that. And halfway through my deployment, I reached out to somebody I would consider a mentor. I knew him as a gunny. He was my company guns. And then, I hit him up. He was a first sergeant at the time, and he was in Bahrain at the time. I was just like, hey, I'm thinking of these two different billets next. What are you thinking? He's like, well, you could do those two, but you've kind of already done them. So why would you want to do that? Why don't you come out here and work for me in Bahrain? And he was like kind of saying it in jest, like there's no way he's on a deployment right now, and he'd have to come out here in February. It's a 5 month turnaround. And so I sat there and I stewed, after I got off the phone with him, and I, you know, I had a decision. I talked over with my wife. We wrote out a list of pros and cons, and the list of pros were so much longer than the cons. Like the only real con was it's a 13-month time over there with a 5 month turnaround from where I'm at now. Um, and and that was really it. And does that suck? Sure, it
Yep.
does. But we talked for 2 weeks. I called my monitor, told him, he's like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're on a deployment now and you want to leave in 5 months again? Is everything good with you? I was like, yeah, everything's fine. Look,
Yeah.
this isn't just an out of the blue decision. Like
Yeah.
I've been discussing this for 2 weeks now. And so he was like, all right, man, you got orders. I was like, appreciate it. And then whenever I was over there, he called me back up, and I had 6 months left. He's like, "Hey, where do you want to go next?" And before you say anything, you're not going to another deploying unit because that was
Yeah.
my third back-to-back deployment.
Yeah.
Like I just kept going, and all I wanted to do was keep hitting deployments. And so
Yeah.
Bahrain was my eighth.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I did the 2002 Afghanistan, and then I went to a TRADOC, training rotation, assignment. I worked in a schoolhouse, Fort Leavenworth, and then I was a student at Staff College. And, everybody it was 2000, 5, 6. And truthfully, nobody there. I was one of the few guys that had a deployment under my belt. And things were heating up in Iraq pretty bad. Afghanistan was still what it was. And I got an assignment to Korea after that. And I got pissed, you
Oh.
know. And so, as soon as I got to Korea, I called my branch guy, literally. The like I stayed up the first time I had my own desk in my own office. I stayed up that very first night and I called back to Army Personnel Command, HRC, and I said, "Hey, how do I get back to Fort Bragg?" And they're like, "What are you talking about? You just got to Korea." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but I want to go back to Bragg right away, as soon as possible." And then, I started talking to my peers and they're like, what's the big deal? I'm like, because there's a fucking war going on, man. Like, that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what warriors do. If there's a war going on, that's where you want to be, right?
Yep.
I know that for a lot of people, they don't understand that. I know for a lot of civilians, they don't understand it at all. But when you're of that ilk and that is what you do for a living, you want to be where the action's at. I
Yeah.
mean, you feel an obligation, you feel a drive. It's like this nagging thing. Like, I was sitting in Korea for a year, and don't get me wrong, it was a good organization. I had a great time, made a lot of friends, but the whole time in the back of my head, it was like, it's shit's getting hot in Iraq, man. Like, you got to go. And,
Yeah.
unfortunately or fortunately, I got what I asked for. I went back to Bragg and literally, I kid you not, I left Korea. I was going back to my same old unit, and I left Korea. And in the like 2 days that I was out of comms, I got an email from my gaining unit that were like, "Hey, we need you to get to Fort Bragg as soon as possible because you need to turn around and go to Iraq right away." So I
Oh
did
shit.
12 months in Korea. I came home, I picked up the family, moved them to Bragg, got in, got in dock basically at Fort Bragg, go through all the in processing and stuff. And then I got on a plane. I was back in the States less than 45 days, and then I went to Iraq for 3 months
Holy shit.
because a guy got fired, you
Oh,
know,
yeah, that'll do it.
right? So, but you know what? Didn't bat an eye, didn't blink, wasn't pissed. Like, it was like, all right, here we go. I'm back in the swing, right? And so, back in the 82nd where I wanted to be, and I got what I asked for. But that was the way, we all got in that cycle. I spent from 2000, summer of 2006 to summer of 2011, right? In a 60-month span, I was gone 40 months,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was just the way things were. Our
Yeah.
generation, that was somewhat normal.
Yeah.
If you were a senior leader, whether it was an NCO or an officer, right, and you got into that wicked rotation, that was not uncommon. We all
Mm-hmm.
suffered through that stuff.
Yep. You know, I, that's an aspect I personally miss. Like, I'm sitting back here stateside now, and it's like, man, I'm never deploying again. And for better or worse, I am never jumping on another deployment again. And me and one of my coworkers, he's actually an army guy, and solid dude, like good friend now. We're always joking and we're always sending like Ukraine videos back and forth to each other.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, hey bro, you want to go to Ukraine? He's like, bro, I'm down. Let's fucking do it. And it's just like he's like, you're not gonna go yet. I was like, yeah, you're probably right.
yeah.
But those are the relationships and those are the aspects of the military life that you do miss. Like, I would never join a contracting company, um, mainly because when you go over there as contractors, and we saw it, what in Fallujah was it back in 2004, whenever those
Yeah, the
um,
Blackwater guys.
Blackwater guys got
Yeah,
ambushed on that rooftop. Like, they're lucky that they got rescued by the US military. When you go over there in those jobs, you don't have the weight of the US military standing behind you.
yeah,
So they very much did get lucky in that
yeah.
incident. Um,
But I have found there are things that you miss, and what you miss is the
mhm.
relationships, you miss the
Yep.
people, right? All of those things. So I found as a former paratrooper, I found an organization down in Florida. It's called the Phantom Airborne Brigade. And we do, and one of my guys who used to work for me, like he sent me a message. He's like, "Hey, sir, you got to check these guys out. I'm down here in Florida. It's round canopy, static line, like military style jumping, and it's all former paratroopers."
Damn.
He's like, "You got to come check these guys out." So I was like, "Okay." So I went down and we do, I'm a member of the organization now. I've been doing it for a couple of years, and it is the only requirement is you have to be a military trained paratrooper. They
Mm,
do not take anybody else. Skydiving doesn't matter. You can't, like, you have to be a graduate of the United States Army Airborne School or an equivalent,
right.
because we do have some international folks, but we do round canopy static line. We jump out of a C-47, World War II aircraft. We do water jumps. We have guys who are, we have three paraplegics and a double amputee that they will jump into a lake,
Oh, wow.
because they can land that way. But I mean, the organization jumps every month, but I go down there and immediately the first time, like I didn't know anybody walking in there. And in 10 minutes, I had 30 new friends. And I had guys that was 1 degree separation. Do you know this guy? Oh, I know that guy. What unit were you in? All of those things. So it is literally, you know, there's even an element of danger because we're still jumping out of planes, right? So
Yeah.
you got that little adrenaline rush, but you're back in that same environment with the same mindset, the same kind of people, and you're doing military stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not the same, but it is a great organization. I love being a part of it. I love going down there and participating. I started jump mastering with those guys again just last fall, which is awesome. But most importantly is those relationships. And it's
Yep.
a great place for veterans to go, to, kind of get brought back into the fold. It's a
Yep.
it's a 501(c) or whatever it's called. And it's just a great place to reinvigorate that type of all the stuff that you were talking about, all the stuff we all miss. Those relationships and the people and the sitting around and bullshitting and all that stuff. It's a great organization. And I encourage veterans of all kinds. If you can find something like that, maybe that's not your thing, that's cool. But if you can find something like it, please go out and find it, because I think it's the one thing that in our battle, all of us, the battle against the 22 a day, like
Mm-hmm.
those are the kinds of things that help no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I think they're, stuff like that we should all be seeking, to kind of help all of us, because we all have shit days, right? I
Oh,
mean,
fuck yeah.
yeah, happens all the time. So, but you get in with a group of folks like that, even if it's not being there, I know that I've got 40 guys down there that I could pick up my phone right now if I'm having a shit day and I can call them and it's all good.
No, that's awesome. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Those organizations are absolutely important. You should always, you should never lock yourself away. You should always be trying to talk
Yep.
to somebody. You know, I, I have one person I talk to every single morning, and it's the same person. It's like, his girlfriend is like, do you literally talk to Matt every single day on your drive into work? Yeah, either he calls me or I call him. Like it's a rotation. And like, what do you guys talk about? Well, what we did this weekend or what we're gonna do the next weekend, or we just repeat stories that we've talked about with each other before. But
Million times.
it's the he's not even a guy I serve with. He's a guy I met in the shooting community, but he served in the military. He works for a different organization now, and he's just one of those solid dudes that's going to be there for you no matter what. I
Yep.
know no matter what, if I'm having a bad day, even if I don't want to talk to him, he'll call, I'll answer, and then my day, just got a little bit better.
Yep. For sure. Yep.
But you know, leadership, mentorship, all those things. Like that's something like I absolutely love talking to people about leadership and mentorship. Making people better than what they were is something that is absolutely important for me, and I'm sure it is for you as well. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. But guys like us who served in different levels of responsibility, serving Marine soldiers, we've developed a passion for helping them, even though we're not even in uniform anymore. But while you were in the uniform, what did you look for in a strong leader? This kind of multiple questions rolled up into one. So, what did you look for in a strong leader? How did you mentor your soldiers? And what was the most rewarding experience you had in developing someone?
So, you know, one of the, as an infantry guy, I always looked for, and my favorite soldiers were always the rough and tumble kids. I would rather have a, a kid who's riding the razor's edge of being in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would much rather have that kid as a soldier than the squeaky clean
Yeah.
any day of the week. And so those folks I loved. And I will tell you that as I progressed, and you probably saw the same thing, as I progressed, and truthfully, as America progressed, those kids who rode the razor's edge were a lot more common when I was younger, like
Mm-hmm.
in and around the early, late 90s and early 2000s than they were in the 20 teens. As an example, when I was a Cav Squadron commander, whenever I got a new officer in, right, a new lieutenant, one of the questions I would always ask them was, "Have you ever been in a fist fight before?" Now I'm not talking boxing at West Point. I'm talking about a legitimate dude you don't know in a bar on the street, you know,
Have you
knuckle.
ever been punched in the face?
Have you ever been punched in the face? And that's really the question I was getting to was, have you ever been punched in the face before? And so I was shocked at the very small number that said yes to that question. And my point to them was always, listen, you've never been in a firefight before, but I can tell you from experience, the first time you're in a firefight, the first time, whether it goes off with an IED or you get a burst of accurate fire, whatever it is, the the reaction is the same as the first time you get punched in the face. Because the first time you get punched in the face, there's a flash of white behind your eyes, your
Mm-hmm.
ears ring, and I'm talking about a good shot, right? Your ears ring and you lose situational awareness.
Yep.
I don't care who you are. The first time it happens, that's what happens. And the first time you get shot at is very, very similar. The problem is that you, as a platoon leader, or you as a troop commander, you've got like 25, 30 dudes that you're responsible for keeping alive. I can't have you trying to unfuck yourself, right? Because people are going to die very,
Mm-hmm.
very quickly if you don't have your shit together. So here in this unit, you're going to get punched in the face a lot in training, and you're going to get used to it. And that way, it's the only way that I can minimize the effect of the first time you get shot at. That's the only thing I can do. So my organization was all about that, and it did include some physicality. My development program for my officers when I was a Cav Squadron commander, started on, it was a Friday, every Friday afternoon, we would do an officer professional development class of some sort, right? So it was teaching something, everything from administrative to tactical. But it would always start with a classroom. And then we would go out and we would play a physical sport, where like hitting each other was part of the game, right? And listen, I had female officers in my organization, and those young ladies would get out and they would give as good as they got. And a lot of my guys, most of my guys, didn't go easy on them. But everybody there was some physicality to the game. Um, and people got hurt, and kind of we got some bloody noses and that kind of stuff. And then after it was over with, everybody sat around, and we always had coolers of beer, and we always had coolers of Gatorade if you didn't drink beer. But we would probably sit around for almost as long as we spent playing, and it was just that team building time.
Yeah.
So that entire Friday afternoon, and I ran this almost every week. That Friday afternoon would start about 1400, and it would probably go till about 1730.
Hell yeah.
And
No,
that
one of
was
the
a consistent, professional development, education wise, professional development, physical, and then team building on top of it. And I ran that for, a good solid year and a half.
hell yeah. No, that when you said you used to do the physical sports and everything, one thing I know we played back when early in my career, um, really early in the career, and it wouldn't fly these days or even halfway through my career. We used to play combat soccer, and it's a regular old soccer game, but you were allowed to pick up the ball.
That's what we
But
played.
Yeah.
We used to call it Gator Ball.
Yeah.
That was exactly what we played. And what we would do is if you arrived at the same time as the ball, you could lay somebody out.
Well, the way we did is if you were able to pick up the ball, if you picked up the ball, you were able to do whatever you want to somebody. You could clothesline
Fair
them,
enough.
tackle them. You could do.
Yeah.
It was a physical sport, and yeah, you're absolutely right. People got hurt, but it toughened you up.
Yep. And so that was my mindset, and I got that from one of my mentors back when I was a company commander. My battalion commander was a guy named Marty Schweitzer, and we did the same thing. And it was a different game, but still physical. We still did it every week. We still drank beer afterwards, and I got that from him. So that was a mindset that was bred into me. That was the mindset that I handed off to my guys, and you talk about mentorship, and I'll tell you the coolest thing that I get. I've been retired for 5 years. I retired in 2019. I still, to this day, text messages, phone calls, emails from guys who are still in uniform who are still asking my advice.
Same.
And so mentorship never ends.
Yep.
Never, right? If you establish that relationship with somebody, that never ends. And it doesn't end just because somebody left the military. You could both be out of the military. In fact, my mentors were like the guys who raised me in the Army, we're all retired now, but we're
Hmm.
still in contact. I still ask them for advice. We still talk. So, that is something that never ends. If you're doing it right, that is a lifelong relationship, and it goes well beyond the uniform.
No, you're absolutely right. And I still get emails or messages or phone calls from like old guys that were squad leaders while I was a
Sure.
platoon sergeant, and that means a lot, and then I'll get the random like Facebook message from some of my
Yeah.
Marines, and it's
Yeah.
just, and one of the most memorable ones for me was actually last year. One of the Marines, he's like, "Hey, I listened to your podcast from whenever you retired." And, he described the story that I was telling during the podcast about how I kind of just laid into everybody one day because they were being a bunch of bitches. And I laid into the whole platoon. And this Marine, he's out now, but he's like, I thought you hated me my entire time I was in and that you were under me. He's like, you rode me hard. And he's like, I know I was a fuck up back then. The guy got a DUI, almost killed himself, like was legitimately in the hospital,
Yeah.
like like he was on a last limb, like, and he survived and he deployed with us. Um
Wow.
and I was a hard ass back then, but you had to be a hard ass on
Yeah.
them. Um, and but I always liked that Marine. I truly did, but I wanted him to be better than what he was. And he described that, I always thought the grass was greener on the other side. And so I just kind of muddled my way through the rest of my time in the Marine Corps, counting my days. And whenever I got out, I realized life wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. My marriage suffered, this and that suffered. And I started remembering all the lessons that you told us as we were, getting out, or as we were going through deployment, or as we were in training, and everything just started to click, and I started to apply a lot of the stuff that you taught us back then. And I can tell you right now, my life is so much better and my marriage is so much better and everything is in a much better state. I have a child now, everything. He's like, I have you to thank for that. So I was like, hey man, you don't know how much that makes me happy.
Sure.
Like you can't really describe those feelings. And I was like, I never hated you. You're actually one of my favorite Marines in the platoon. Like, you were a solid dude who had some adversity, but we all do. And you worked
Yeah.
through it, and your life is much better now. I was like, kudos to you, and I hope you and your family are doing great. But
Yeah. You can't
those are,
beat that, man. You
fuck
can't
no,
beat that. No.
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 And not a whole lot of people, like people in the military, will always understand like that feeling and always understand like that role that they played. Um, but there's a lot of people in the outside world who never understand that.
Now it's I after I retired, I stepped into the business world for a couple of years. I really didn't enjoy it. And part of it was exactly that. So, you try to relay that. You try and try and help people understand who've never been in the military. And it's like, listen, I wasn't just responsible for them, and I wasn't just responsible for them at work. Like, I was literally responsible for them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, and their family.
Yeah.
Like, everything about it, you have a responsibility for. So, if somebody gets in trouble, it's not as simple as you're fired. Or if somebody gets a DUI, it's not as simple as you're fired and you never have to worry about them again. Like, those and people just don't understand the bonds that are built. They don't understand how you are instantly, integrated into somebody's personal life.
Hmm.
Like, there was people that I worked with, worked for, had people that worked for me, and I'd ask questions about their family, and they'd be like, why? What do you care? Like, why are you asking me about my family?" I'm like, why wouldn't I? And they're like, "Well, I've never had a boss do that before." Okay, well, I mean, I'm not, that's how I operate, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's a very different life, especially if you do like a life tour like you and I did, like a whole career. Guys who pass, especially, they do 3 years, they live in the barracks the whole time, like that. It's not necessarily the same experience. But yeah, if you do the 20 plus, and you get into a leadership role where you have some real responsibility, people don't get that unless they've been a part of it. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it truly is. I wouldn't change anything about my life or any of the decisions that
Nope.
I've made, like because the bonds you made and the experiences, like people don't realize how well equipped you are leaving the military, especially if you do those life tours. And I like that. I'm gonna coin that phrase now. But they don't realize how invaluable and how much experience they do have getting out.
Oh, for sure.
While you're in, it's just a natural progression of things. But whenever you get out and you see how things are in the business world, I did a job for 6 months working for a security firm, as a trainer when I retired, and I hated it because nobody cared about anything, and it was all about the money.
Yep.
Um, and I was just like, this is shit. And I'm in a company now where 80% of the company is all former military. It's a contracting company, and you know I'm you know I worked at the basic school teaching indirect fire and close air support, for about a year and a half before I moved into another role. Um, and I love both positions. But while I was at the basic school, I had the ability to reach out and touch every Marine officer who
Yep.
joined the Marine Corps, in their training on different aspects. And today, I actually went to breakfast with one of them that I met him almost 2 years ago, and we formed a bond. When he graduated infantry officers course, he asked me to go to his graduation. That meant a lot. Then he's
Sure.
over there on the West Coast, and throughout the past year, he's been messaging me, calling me, and like asking me for advice. He went on deployment. While he's on deployment, he's like, "Hey, what do you think? Did I handle this right?" I'm like, "Bro, you got it." And like he's back here in Virginia now, and it's like we got together and had breakfast and just kind of reconnected in person. It's awesome.
Yeah. You don't get that in the
Hmm.
outside world. Like,
No.
it's not a thing. I left the company. I worked for a company for 3 years. I left there, and some of it's my own doing, but a lot of it is, just the people that, I worked with. I have not talked directly to more than one person. There's one guy that I worked with for almost the entirety of the 3 years that I've talked to since I left there. Nobody else. And no, by the way, nobody's ever reached out to me. I had a whole bunch of people, as you can imagine. "Oh yeah, man, let's stay in touch. Oh, I'll check on you. I'll do this and I'll that." Haven't heard from anybody, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
But the guys that I went to Afghanistan with in 2002, right? My fellow company commanders, my battalion commander, our brigade commander, I was texting with them this morning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just and I've known those guys for over 20 years.
Hmm.
So, it is definitely not the same thing. And I don't, like you said, I wouldn't change anything. The military took its toll. My body's beat to shit, as most of us are. But I wouldn't trade any of it. None of it.
Hell yeah. So to kind of keep the conversation moving into a different direction now, like as we mentioned in the intro, you're an author. And so back in 2022, you wrote a book called Keep Moving, Keep Shooting. Can you tell us what the book is about and what gave you the inspiration behind this book?
So it's not Clay Novak's war stories. This is not my 20 plus years in uniform. This is a novel. It's a Jack Ryan, Jack Reacher, Jason Bourne kind of thing. And if you're into that stuff, I can promise you're going to enjoy this book. So it is the book itself and the content is actually very related to as I transitioned out of the military. And so the story of writing it matters as much as the content of the book because it's all kind of tied together. So as I retired, all of these mentors that we've been talking about, they told me, they're like, listen, you're in the civilian world, you're you're not going to stay as into your brain's not going to be as active as it was on active duty. It's just not. So you gotta keep yourself engaged. So find something to do. And I didn't know what to do. They both use the word creative. I'm not a creative, didn't consider myself to be a creative guy. My best Army friend said, hey, you're a really good writer, in uniform. Like you put together some good products. You should think about writing. And I was like, nobody needs another war story book. Like there's too many of those. Well, my best friend in the world from growing up is a TV guy. Like he's a writer, producer, did some acting, but he's worked in Hollywood for years. And he goes, write fiction, man. He goes, you can do whatever you want to write about space or diseases or what. He goes, you can write whatever the fuck you want to. So I started writing and I just did it as like, and
Form of
just
therapy.
exact it's a form of therapy, right? Keep my brain engaged. But I never had any intent to publish. I really never had any intent to write a book, but I just started writing. And so I just started writing a story. The main character, because again, no intent to publish. The main character is a retired infantry officer. He spent a lot of time in the 82nd. Right. I wrote myself. The main character is probably 85% me, to be honest with you. Um, and so I just wrote this story about this retired Army officer, this retired infantry guy. And I never had a plan. I never had an outline. I never had a story arc. I never had anything. I was just writing. I would think and I would write, and I would think and I would write. And it was, I'd write during my lunch hour at work, or I would write while I was that 10 minutes while you just finish a task and you got a meeting in 10 minutes and it's not worth starting anything else. So I'd write a little bit here and there. So I wrote this, I got about two-thirds of the way through it, and I was like, man, like I should I could finish this. This could be a real book. So I finished it. And basically it is, this retired guy, he retired in the Midwest. He's living with this lady who is people that we ran across, right? So she's a PhD. She's an expert in Middle East studies, not uncommon, right?
Hmm.
And so they had a professional relationship that turned into a personal relationship. And she gets, somebody reaches out to her and says, hey, there's a potential terror threat to the United States. Can you take a look at this for us? So the story evolves from there. And really, what it evolves into is there is a threat to the United States, but it's not the threat that it presents at the very beginning. It evolves and it turns into something very, very unexpected. But I can tell you, it's high adventure. I have had people tell me that they always ask when the sequel is coming out, and we'll get to that in a minute. They ask, or they say, I never saw the ending coming. I've had a ton of people say that it is a super fast read. I actually had a guy tell me that he read the whole thing on an LA to New York flight, which I have a
Holy
hard time
shit.
believing. But I do know people who have read it in one sitting or two sittings. So it's a can't put it down kind of thing. And then the last one I hear from everybody is when are they going to make it a movie? Evidently, my writing style is very visual. People can picture it very, very clearly. So the main character is Terry Davis. He's just a regular guy. He's smarter than average, but he's not a SEAL. He's not a special forces guy. He's just a regular old infantry guy. He's been to combat a bunch of times. And that's him, and that's who he is. And he's middle aged. He's in his mid to late 40s, and his body's kind of beat up, and he's just a regular guy. But he gets shoved in the middle of this, and he can't not do what he's always done. He
Right.
can't not step up. He can't not get involved. He can't not, he can't look the other way. Um, so that's the book. And it's available on Amazon. It's called Keep Moving, Keep Shooting. I've sold, over 1,000 copies. People love it. It's got a 4.8 star rating on Amazon. And really out of 100 and I think it's 121 reviews, 119 of them are 4 or 5 stars.
I remember you posted um in the group or something about you got your first negative
Yeah,
review.
I got my only 1 star review. Yeah, I got one on Amazon and I got one on Goodreads. And so I mean, I'll take that. 121 reviews and I get one star and
Yeah.
one 3 star, and then all the rest of them are 4 and 5. So people like it, and they are looking for the sequel. So that's uh that's where it's at. And again, I think if you pick it up, if that's your jam, if you're into that kind of stuff, even if you're not a reader, my mom will kill me for saying this. My mom hadn't read, she's not a reader. She never has been, but she read it. It was the first book she had read in, a long, long time, and she read it cover to cover. So if I can get somebody like that who is not a reader and truthfully is not into that genre, um, to read it and like it, and it's not just because she's my mom, but people really do dig it.
Hell yeah. No, I actually I took my daughter out a couple nights ago and like I was like, "Hey, let's go out." And my daughter's 10, she'll be 11 soon here. And I'm trying to, with all the years that I missed, of her life in
I get
military
it.
service, it's like I'm trying to create opportunities just to go out and take her
Sure.
because there was a period there where she's like, "No, I don't want to go out." And now she's like,
Yeah.
now I'm like, "Hey, let's go out." She's like, "Where?" "Let's go to the bookstore." "Okay." And it's like, cool. So like the bookstores are a thing now. And
Yeah.
so went there and it was the day I reached out to you, like, "Hey, you want to come on the podcast?" And I was going to order on Amazon, but I was like, well, let me see if they have it at the bookstore since I'm going there anyway. They didn't. It's on back order. So I'm going to be ordering it on Amazon.
Okay.
So no, but you also answered one of my questions that I was planning on asking, and that was like, do you ever imagine yourself as a character? Obviously, the answer is yes, and
It's
and
impossible not to. It
exactly.
really is. And it's fun too because the characters, not just the main character, but the characters in the book are based on people that I know.
Mm-hmm.
They're based on either a conglomeration of 2 or 3 people that I know, or people that I mean, there's one character in the book who is a carbon copy of my best army friend. So you know, it's easy to write those people when you know them or when you have a relationship with them. Even the conglomerate, people who are a piecemeal of 2 or 3 people, it's fun to write them, and it keeps it easy and it keeps it consistent. So yeah, I do see myself as that main character. I mean, like, the guns he carries are guns that I have in my safe. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the knife that he carries is that one hanging on the wall. Like, it's all of my stuff. So yes, I do picture myself as the main character, more like the main character is me, probably about 85%.
I just thought of something funny. I wish somebody would write a book about barracks stories, barracks life.
So I have said that. I think the title of the book should be called No Shit, and then it's all like your best stories from the military.
Oh
That would
man.
be sell millions of copies.
It absolutely would. And then the US military, the DoD in general, would be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, they'd be like, "You're not supposed. Those are secrets. You're not supposed to tell the people those things,
It's
even though they all know what's going on."
kind of like Donnie O'Malley's book that he wrote back in like 2015 or something, Embarrassing Confessions from a Marine Lieutenant. Like
Yeah.
That book triggered some people, and it was fucking hilarious.
Yeah, because it's true, and we all
Hmm.
know it's true, you
Hmm.
know. Yeah, those are the best stories. Barrack stories, whether it's and it doesn't matter. I'm sure on ship stories are the same. Like
Yep.
it's all the same stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll go to the next question, which you kind of alluded to. Are you currently working on another book?
Book two and book three are done.
Oh,
They're
hell yeah.
written. Yeah. And actually I'm part of the way through the fourth book. But I've been working so hard to sell the first book and now I'm in contract negotiations with a publisher now to publish the second and third book. So I've been working so hard to get those to, those the first one sold, to people, and then the second and third sold to be published.
Okay.
I haven't been writing so much on the fourth one. But I do, the activities and the actions that I'm taking to try and gain notoriety also consume time. I mean, I told you I co-host a podcast, the Elsa Kurt Show with Clay Novak. We do politics of the day. It's a weekly podcast. Um, I blog twice a week. I do a lot of things um, to bring attention to keep moving, keep shooting. So, writing the fourth book in the series before I even get two and three, published is taking a little bit of a back burner. But there are more coming. They're already done.
All right. Hell yeah. So, kind of moving on to like another role that you currently are in right now, and it's kind of how we got our introduction.
Yeah.
You're the team captain for G Code. How did you become affiliated with G Code, and how would you describe the role as team captain?
Yeah, so G Code, for those that aren't familiar, I know you did that, an interview with the founder and the owner, right? That was a great interview, by the way.
Thank you.
So G Code is a tactical gear and holster company out of Wilmington, North Carolina. Um, and so one of the things that I've been doing is I've been freelancing articles about stuff that interests me, shooting, guns, gear, hunting stuff, all those things. And I wrote an article about the war belts, which is kind of, the evolution from back when you and I were young, the old, LBE,
Yeah.
LCE load carrying equipment to the body armor and then to plate carriers and then, now chest rigs and everybody's going back to a belt. So I wrote an article about war belts, and I'm a G code guy. Like before I ever got associated with the company, I've been using their equipment for a long time. And so the example that I wrote about and even used a picture of was a G code belt. And I published it on LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden I get a guy that I don't know tags another guy that I don't know and says, "Hey, check this out." So one of those two guys contacts me and says, "Hey, I'm about to become the new marketing and sales director at G Code. Do you have time for a phone call?" Sure. So I got on the phone, a guy named Kevin Skipper, who's running marketing and sales at G Code, and he says, "Hey, we're getting ready to start a pro staff. Would you be interested?" Yeah. He goes, "Well, the other guy who tagged me is the new COO. And that's Greg Jones, who you and I have in common as a friend." So I got asked to be, and listen, unlike you, my competitive shooting background is clay targets. I shot trap, skeet, and sporting clays my entire life. I shoot rifle pistol professionally now recreationally, but I'm not a three gun guy like you are, like guys are. I do that stuff for fun, but I'm not a competitive guy. But what I can do is I can write and I can, I got some leadership skills from 25 years in the Army. So after meeting Kevin and talking to Greg, they asked me to be the captain of the pro staff. And they did it because what they don't want is a bunch of shooters wearing a bunch of G code stuff to competitions and not feeling like they're part of a team or
Right.
not feeling like they have a home.
Yep.
So, me as the captain of the pro staff, that's kind of what I've been charged with. And so, I live outside of Chicago. We've got the companies in North Carolina, right? You're further north, right? Or, you
Virginia.
know, Virginia. So we've got guys out in Colorado. We've got folks all over the place. Um, and so we're not all based together. So what I've been charged with is to make sure that the pro staff knows and understands, one, they have a home. This isn't just a fleeting thing. Two, there's a support network behind them for whatever it is that they need, whether it's gear or whether it's, whatever it is. But it's also to make sure that that's an actual team. It's not
Hmm.
just a bunch of shooters wearing, using a bunch of gear. It's, if we've got somebody who's a good shooter, but they're not good at social media, then we have people on the team who are good at social media and they can help each other, right?
Hmm.
Or if we've got somebody who is, maybe they're a pistol guy and they want to get into rifle, they can talk to somebody else on the pro staff and go, hey, I'm going to outfit myself. Where do I need to go with this, et cetera, et cetera. So it's folks helping each other out and not just people running around with labels on their stuff. So listen, and again, I'm not a guy who, just because G Code asked me to do this, I would never do this if their equipment wasn't good stuff.
Yeah.
And they have in my opinion, the best, if not some of the best stuff out there, period. Their holsters are fantastic. The quality that they put into their equipment and into their products is unmatched. Like, most people don't realize, when you buy a molded Kydex holster, right? You get that from the manufacturer. Um, Chances are that it's been proofed. If it's been proofed at all, it's been proofed with a molded replica of a pistol, right? G Code has an entire line of demilled metal real guns. So if you order a pistol, a holster for a 1911, right? They've got 1911 5-inch barrel, 4-inch barrel, 3.5-inch barrel. They've got them all sitting there, and they're all real guns. And every holster that comes off the assembly line, they test it with a real gun, not a replica, not a mold, a real gun, every single one. And that's just an example of the quality of care that they put into the products. And I would not work with any organization that didn't have that level of quality. And G Code is, in my opinion, just the best stuff around. I love it.
Hell yeah. No, I'm happy to be on the team. I'm happy to
Yeah.
be, connected with you. And you're absolutely right. Whenever it comes to like that support network, it is extremely important. Like, where else are you gonna, besides like a professional shooting team like the Army Marksmanship Unit or the
Right.
Marine Corps shooting team, are you gonna have a team of guys that are, cross country where, hey, I want to get into this match. What do I need for it? And then there's
Right.
somebody right there that's like, hey, I've done those matches. Like, be prepared to experience this. This is what you need to look out for. This is some of my recommendations. Um, you know, most of the time, it's like if you are on a team or if you are a sponsored shooter or whatever you want to call it, brand ambassador, I don't know. You're just there's 9 times out of 10 you're just another person that they're supporting, and there's not a team behind it. Like one of the shooting teams I'm part of is Double Star Shooting Team. They make rifles out of Kentucky, and one of the I'm not a team captain there or anything, but I'm a person who likes to keep connections. And like I've been in the shooting community for 10 years now, and I knew everybody that was on Double Star. It's like I'm gonna create a group chat between all the active people that are on Double Star, so we can just keep in communication with each other and like, hey, what matches are you going to? What's your shooting schedule look like this year? So we can all stay in the same house together or be on the same squad together. That way we can actually be a shooting team together.
Yeah. That's the importance of the team itself. And then the other thing that, I want to do is to make sure that they stay linked to the products they're using. So,
Hmm.
I want to set a rhythm so that the shooters who are using the equipment can provide feedback to the company itself and say, hey, I'm using this. It would be really nice if it could do this. Or I don't have one of these. Do we have one? Can we make one? And make it a real two-way conversation where, you know, the company is getting feedback from people who are actually using their products on a regular basis under, great conditions to test their gear. And I don't want it to fall on deaf ears. I don't want the team to, to provide feedback and then nothing ever happens with the product itself. So I'm the conduit for that. That's what I've been asked to do, or that's what I'm taking on as the team captain. And again, I'm not a huge competition guy. I mean, you want to go out and shoot 100 clay targets, I'm your guy. But and listen, I understand the shooting world. I understand the competitions. You know, I got like 8 million things going on, and another expensive hobby is not something I've got time for. But I do enjoy shooting, and I am a shooter. So, this integration with G Code and the pro staff and everything from the shooter to the manufacturer and linking those two together. That's what we're trying to do, just for the average consumer to make sure they're getting the best gear possible.
Hell yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. And you're right.
Yeah,
Having that conduit from the individual competitor to the sponsored shooter to the company, that is invaluable. And I would say from the people I can think of off the top of my head, like Cardi B, Jonathan Cardenas to Chris Jones to Nick Bazone, there's good representation, and they're guys that legitimately have that give a fuck factor about who they have on their jersey, one, and and the type of person that they are. And a lot of it comes
yeah,
down to you want good people, and those are the best. Those are the best people, not just in quality of being able to shoot, but just as a person, their
yeah.
quality.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. And again, everybody's bringing their own set of skills, and it's not just about shooting. I mean, we've got some folks who are, absolute beasts when it comes to, so managing social media. People, we got a couple folks, that have some celebrity to them, that are on the team that, can open some doors for all of us, for everybody on the team. So everybody's bringing something to the table, and it's not just being able to pull a trigger with a high level of proficiency. So it's going to be pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to it for 2025.
Heck yeah. No, I'm excited to, get connected with everybody, and I know we have a meeting coming up soon. So I'm looking forward to that. But other than that, that's all I have for questions. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, Matt, again, thanks for the invite. I love doing this. It's as you know, as a host, it's always more fun to be the guest.
Yeah.
I do this every week. I talk politics of the day. I'm always writing. But thanks for this. Thanks for all of your years of service, that life tour that you did. There's we've got an entire generation of folks that we spent 20 years plus at war. And now there's a lot of us that are out here, and we're trying to figure out what to do with our lives. And stuff like this is good. This is not just what you do with your podcast, what I do with mine, or my writing, or your shooting, or whatever. We're still setting the example as leaders for all of those former, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and everybody else, that there's life after the military, and there's a lot of good things out there. You just got to find your thing, and chase after it. So I appreciate everything that you're doing, and I appreciate again being on the show.
And no, I appreciate you coming on. And, just because you kind of ended it like that, one thing I wanted to end it with is like for those who are struggling, one, like seek help. Don't go internal. Second one, there's a book out there that I've been reading, and we've had the author of the book on, Adam Majors. It's called Odysseus and the Oar. It's kind of correlating the journey of Odysseus on his way back from the Trojan War to, correlating it with the modern day warrior and the life lessons that you can learn, and it's the whole healing process. So if you have the time and you have the interest and you're going through a rough time and you have one of those bad days, that's one of those books that's really good to pick up because you're going to learn something from it. So my recommendation is go out there, read that book. One of our previous episodes and a soon to be a future episode we have coming out is with Adam Majors, and it's just it's cathartic and it helps. And that's the type of people we need to surround ourselves with.
Hey, listen, the title of my book, Keep Moving, Keep Shooting, is a mantra. Like,
Hmm.
no joke. Like the last thing you want to do is get bogged down.
Yep.
And all of us, who were in that world, you know, when in doubt, right? Fire and maneuver. That's what we do. Keep moving and keep shooting. And you're never, you're never going to get stuck if that's what you do. So, it's kind of along the same lines. But that's kind of, that's a drill sergeant told me that when I was private. We were doing, two-man buddy live fire drill, and some kid said something. Well, what happens? What happens, drill sergeant? And he goes, "Listen, man, when in doubt, keep moving and keep shooting." And I was like, well, shit, like that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So, um, so there it is, right? There's the mantra. Don't get bogged down. Just keep moving and keep shooting.
Hell yeah. And to the listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Um, if you, have anything you'd like to let us know, please reach out. Read the book, keep moving and keep shooting. I'm going to be picking it up here shortly. And I'll have them back on and we'll talk more about the book. I love reading something and, talking about certain subjects and like picking certain things. Well, where did this inspiration come from?
Yeah.
So we're going to definitely have to do that. But to the listeners, we really do hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.